Welcome, everyone, to another great meeting of the Criminal Law Subcommittee of the House Courts of Justice Committee. We have a couple of administrative matters. First, that we believe we are going to have Delegate Watts, your HB 746, that is to go by for the day. HB 1063, Delegate Corey's bill, that will go by for the day. Delegate Fowler's HB 83, that will go by for the day and be brought up again on Monday at request. And I don't believe we have any more buys for the day.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you want to discuss it first, but House Bill 266, I have an amendment. I think it may be more controversial, so if we could take that by.
And at the request of Delegate Watts, we are going to have HB, I'm sorry, which one was it? 266?
266.
266 go by for the day. Can you contact Steve and just let him know?
How do I contact him? Yeah.
All right, so here's our sort of the plan for the day. We have we are already one member down because of a funeral out of state. We have a number of members who have hard stops. So we are going to at least begin with our larceny threshold bills, and then we'll see what else we can get done in the short amount of time that we have.
He's sitting there. Did he not hear you? Isn't that funny? He did say that. He's sitting there waiting. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I'll go tell him. That's right.
All right, so we have first Delegate Lindsay, HB 101.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, here relative to HB 995, the larceny threshold. Right now, the larceny threshold in Virginia is a lowly $500. That was, after some great Herculean effort, I think last year or year before. Previous to that, it had been, even lower at $200. But this amount, this $500 amount, is still, in terms of states across the nation, one of the absolute lowest. When we look at the larceny threshold, and most of the members here understand this, but some in the audience may not. In terms of criminality, we look at misdemeanors and felonies. Misdemeanors are offenses where the worst thing that can happen is up to a $1,000 fine, up to 12 months in jail. Felony is that offense that it can impact your ability to vote. It can impact your ability to hold office. Did I disconnect something? Oh, okay. It can impact your ability to vote. It can impact your ability to be a notary, and it can even impact your ability to get school loans. Up until very recently, it was $200 in the Commonwealth of Virginia, one of the lowest in the nation, and most recently it was at $500. We believe that moving it up to $1,000 would be very much in keeping with the distinction between what is the most menial of offenses and what is the most significant that would bring about the need for a consequence such as taking away one's right to vote, putting one at risk to incarceration, 5 years to maybe up to 20 years, and so that's the reason for the bill, and that is the basis for why we brought it.
Thank you, Delegate Lindsay. Are there any questions from the committee? We would be making a pretty serious change to the criminal code if we were to do this, and this affects a number of areas of the code. This is not just shoplifting. This is all areas of the code that we include with larceny.
That would be correct. Shoplifting, bad checks,
embezzlement,
fraud offenses. That's correct.
Right. I just ask a quick question of Mr. Mutnick. We are at this point. We've got everything in the code, right? We're not missing anything.
Mr. Chair, all of the bills today, including 995, include every statute that was amended in 2018 from $200 to $500.
Belt and suspenders. Thank you. Delegate Bell.
Mr. Chair, just a procedural question. I see several bills are in this space. Does the chair have a plan of how he's going to let patrons present and then decide what to do? To take them up separately,
yeah.
we might end up in conflict.
That is true, and we will take them separately, but we will have this discussion. We called this one first for a reason.
Very good.
So, would anyone here like to speak on this bill in favor? Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Brian Moran, Secretary of Public Safety, and we are very much in support of this legislation. The Department of Criminal Justice Services recently conducted a study with respect to some of the concerns about raising the larceny threshold. We thought maybe the amount of the larceny would go up, but the number of crimes would go up. In fact, just the opposite. The total value of property stolen annually in retail larceny thefts decreased in the year following the threshold change. So it hasn't sky hasn't fallen, raising it to 500. The 1,000 would bring us, we're one of 15 states now that are less than 1,000. So this would bring us up to what 35 other states are doing.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Anyone else here like to speak in favor of this bill? Anyone else like to speak against this bill?
Mr. Chairman, Rob Bohannon here representing the Virginia Retail Merchants Association. We are in opposition to the bill. Wanted to give a little bit of data from the National Retail Federation research from 2018. Saw that in states where felony threshold had been raised, over half of retailers reported an increase in organized retail crime. None reported a decrease. And right now, retailers spend about 10% of their loss prevention budget to prevent organized retail crime. High-end electronics, iPhones, things like that are desired products and stolen for easy internet sales. We're concerned. We raised the threshold 2 years ago, doubled it. Now we're looking at, or almost doubled it. Now we're looking at doubling it again just 2 years later. That seems like a huge jump, particularly small retailers. They absorb these costs within their business models, and their costs aren't going down at all. And now they're having to absorb greater cost because there are folks out there that keep track of what these thresholds are and use them to avoid felony penalties by staying right under that. So that's a huge concern of ours. That as this goes up, there will be folks who will monitor that and use it to the detriment of retailers.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Jody Roth on behalf of Virginia Retail Federation. We have a longstanding policy of opposing this, as you all are aware, for all the reasons that were just mentioned by Mr. Bohannon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Parker Slabaugh, Virginia Food Industry Association. For the reasons stated by Mr. Bohannon and Ms. Roth, we also oppose the bill. Thank you.
Delegate Lindsay, you get the last word.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, when we came before you 2 years ago, this was a compromise that was made when we were in a compromising position. I think we've got a more well-rounded perspective given circumstances and the change of circumstances and an appreciation for the value of the dollar. I'd ask that this committee advance the legislation.
Delegate Carol Foy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For me, I was completely in support of Delegate Hayes' $1,500 threshold increase. I think that would put us more in line with what the median of states is actually doing. When we think of felonies, we need to think of some of the most egregious crimes in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Felonies are rape, robbery, murder, and we're talking about property damage or property charge like a theft. We also want to make sure that's egregious also. I've never had, representing hundreds if not thousands of clients, have someone say, actually check the code of Virginia before I took this coat to make sure that it was under the threshold amount. That just doesn't happen. So for me, I understand taking a temperature in the room. That seems to be general consensus, especially amongst the administration, that this is the bill that everyone supports, and I will also support it also. Thank you. So thank you for bringing this bill also, Delegate.
Thank you, Delegate Carol Foy. This committee operates by motion.
Would you report? Second.
There is a motion and a second to report this excellent bill. All those, please vote on the electronic voting machine.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you.
Thank you very much. We have clerk will close the roll. Thank you. We have a number of other larceny threshold bills. We can certainly hear additional testimony for them. We've sort of made a policy decision at this point, but we have a couple of people here who've had their bills. We can hear them, or we can make a motion to incorporate those into Delegate Lindsay's bill. What's your pleasure?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would actually be, after having numerous conversations for the last several weeks, I'd love to have my bill, HB 263, incorporated into Delegate Lindsay's bill.
There a motion and a second?
So moved.
There's a motion and a second to incorporate HB 263 into Delegate Lindsay's 995. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those against, nay. Thank you very much, Delegate Lopez.
Thank you very much.
It's not a vote.
It's not a voice vote, right?
Yeah, it is. It's fine. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Delegate Hayes, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Chair, I'm
Sir.
sorry, I have a procedural question.
Yes.
Or, I don't know what this is, parliamentary inquiry, I guess. Can we incorporate after we have reported, or does it have to be done before? In other words, has the first one left our...
So, I guess I will have to defer to some of the experts up here. We've certainly been doing it already over the course of this session.
Maybe it just struck me for the first time.
Maybe we shouldn't have been, but...
I know that we just make... I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I think we just make recommendations to the full committee.
That's right.
Strictly speaking, that's all we're doing anyway.
So it would still be in the breast of the full committee. And
okay,
yeah.
I wasn't even objecting, just kind of... Okay,
Sure.
thank you.
Delegate Hayes, would you like us to incorporate your bill as well?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Just trying to find that sweet spot of what we ought to do in terms of making sure that the punishment fits the crime. I guess I'm going to go ahead and present the bill, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
And so you have before you HB 286, which would move the felony larceny threshold from $500 to $1,500. And certainly, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, most people associate the word felony with serious crimes such as murder and assault. But in the Commonwealth, a person can be charged with a felony for stealing an $800 bicycle or a smartphone because we have a felony theft threshold of $500 or less. If they result in a conviction, those charges can have wide-ranging and long-lasting consequences, including the inability to obtain certain jobs, the lack of access to certain housing communities, public assistance, and even college financial aid, as mentioned earlier, and several social bonds with family members and friends. The felony threshold amounts vary considerably across the country, from $2,500 in Texas to $500 in Virginia to $200 in New Jersey. But what accounts for these discrepancies is the question. Several states set their thresholds years or even decades ago and have not updated them regularly, if at all. In that time, inflation has effectively increased the penalties. Some states have recognized the problem and acted to safely raise felony thresholds. Since 2000, for instance, at least 39 states have done so, including 9 states that have done this twice. And what we're simply saying is that Virginia should join the chorus of those lawmakers that have done it twice. These changes reflect not only the gradual impact of inflation, but also allow states to focus corrections resources on more serious offenses and make punishment more proportionate to theft crimes. And I hope it's the will of the body to report this bill.
Thank you, Delegate Hayes. Is there anyone from the public who would like to be able to speak on Delegate Hayes' bill?
Greetings, Mr. Chair and members of the subcommittee. My name is Dominique Martin, Policy Research Analyst with New Virginia Majority. For the reasons that the delegate has stated, we also support this bill.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Safstrom. I'm the Dunn Legal Fellow at the ACLU of Virginia. I'm here in order to testify that our organization supports this policy change, as Virginia is behind its neighbors and much of the rest of the country in this respect. As mentioned, 37 states have raised their threshold since 2000, and almost 1 out of 4 of these states has raised it twice. 30 states have a threshold that is at 1,000 or higher, including Georgia, Texas, Arkansas, Kansas, Mississippi, and North Carolina. And even our immediate neighbors have higher thresholds than Virginia, including North Carolina, Maryland, D.C., and West Virginia that all have it set at 1,000, Delaware at 1,500, and South Carolina at 2,000. Additionally, although stealing isn't right, the punishment should fit the crime. Communities of color and people with low income continue to be disproportionately impacted by the low felony larceny threshold and 3 strikes law. Reforming our felony larceny law is a critical step to stop the growing racial and income disparities in our prisons and jails. Additionally, the felonization of minor offenses should not lead to a lifetime of disenfranchisement and other collateral consequences that individuals currently face. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much for all your hard work with the ACLU. Delegate Hayes, you get the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Just please take into consideration what was just mentioned as a fact, as we've done our research to realize that over 30 states have actually moved in the direction of greater than $1,000 for the felony threshold.
Thank you, Delegate Hayes. So we operate by motion. Thank you, Delegate Hayes. Now, I understand that there are a number, I would entertain a motion to strike HB 101, which was Delegate Lindsay's original bill at grand larceny at $750. We seem to have made the policy change to do his bill at $1,000. So I'd entertain a motion to strike HB 101 at this time.
So moved.
We can't do 750 and 1,000?
Oh, no, I'm not. I'm asking, has he asked us to strike it, or? Mr. Chair, again, it was a point of order problem. It has in the past been we strike when they ask us to, when we table on our own, and I'm happy to do either.
Well, then let's make it a motion to table. You're right.
Move to table.
All those in favor, this is a voice vote, right? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those against say nay.
It's a recorded vote.
So
Oh, it's recorded.
hopefully by the end of session, I'll learn all of these. Clerk will close the roll. Now, I understand that there are a lot of people here, since we don't have a lot of time left, and I know I promised everybody in the committee we would definitely have a hard out before 4. I understand that there are a number of people here on Delegate Bell's 1573. Is that right?
I think we have 2 actual witnesses from home.
All right. Let's pull up 1573 then.
So actually, this is a good posture in which to do this today. Witnesses would like to present what happened. We've been trying to come up with a solution that both addresses the problem and fixes the old elbow question of how do you get the person you're trying to get, but not a much broader category.
Right.
Staff had some ideas. We would be asking to put it off anyway, but this will keep the witnesses from having to come back if they would rather not. I'd like to present 2 witnesses. Mr. Chair,
Please.
There was a really terrible dog attack in Fluvanna County where you're going to hear the evidence that the owner was on notice that the dog was supposed to be quarantined, bit the neighbor's daughter quite badly, and the dad is here to present some evidence about what happened. When they captured the animal, it was rabid, which meant she additionally had to get the rabies shots, and it probably explains some of the nature and the viciousness of the attack. The captain from the sheriff's office is here. The only law we could find that would apply There's a letting your dog run at large when you know it's diseased. It's a class 4 misdemeanor. It's for the mange. Even knowing that it has rabies is a complicated inquiry. Usually it requires an ex post examination of the dog. So that's the issue, and I'd like to present both the father and the captain from the Fluvanna Sheriff's Office, if that's okay.
Please.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Richard Schmack. I'm a retired fire captain with the city of Suffolk. My daughter Erica, who is 14, and I would like to have these given to you. These are pictures of my daughter before the injury sustained in the attack. Was getting off the school bus on December the 19th. Was walking up our driveway. A pit bull belonging to the neighbor that was supposed to be in quarantine was out, attacked my daughter from behind, knocking her to the ground. Young lady is right-handed. The animal severed her right index finger completely off. Then proceeded to chew on her left hand. She had over 30 stitches in her left hand. She was able to kick the dog. The dog subsequently ran away. When I got home, my daughter was at the neighbor's house, hemorrhaging and in shock. I found the finger. She was transported to UVA, where they were, unsuccessfully able to reattach it and was surgically amputated. My daughter deserves justice, and the current laws are inadequate. A chicken in the Commonwealth of Virginia, punishment, if this had happened to it, would be much more severe than my daughter. Right now, as it stands, this is a class 4 misdemeanor charge. My daughter is maimed for life. We'll notice that every day that she goes to school. She cannot tie her shoes now. She cannot feed herself. She cannot dress herself. We had to put a 6-foot security fence around our front yard because Fluvanna is a fence-out community. That cost me $7,500 so that my daughter would feel safe getting off a school bus. And that's just not right. So I would implore you to look at those pictures of that lovely young lady and try to go through your mind what she is going to go through for the rest of her life and make the appropriate change. I am in total favor of Delegate Bell's changes and hope that you will support this to the fullest of your ability. Thank you, and thank you, Delegate Bell.
Explain the rabies.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Okay.
The attack happened on a Thursday afternoon. She was taken into emergency surgery at UVA. As I said, it surgically had an amputation of the remaining digit. Monday, while I'm waiting for the fence installer, at 4 o'clock, the health department calls and says, Mr. Schmack, we regret to inform you the dog has tested positive for rabies. We suggest that you go back to the hospital immediately to start the rabies vaccination. We went back to UVA, my daughter and I both, because I was acting as a first responder, and found the digit. And I'm not sure that you know, but just briefly, rabies is passed through saliva. I had an open cut on my hand, handled the finger that was covered in the saliva, gave it to the paramedics. The rig shot, which is the rabies human immunoglobulin shot that we received, depending on your weight, and I'm a big man, was $34,000 for one shot for me and over $27,000 for my daughter. Subsequently, we had to finish the rabies series at the Virginia Health Department, which is another set of 4 shots that we had to take. We had to go the day after Christmas so that she could be given additional shots, and myself. All because an individual failed to do what the law says they're to do already and failed to quarantine a known and dangerous animal. The change needs to be made, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope that you'll see that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'm so very sorry for the pain that your daughter suffered and that you have suffered as a result of her pain. I can't even imagine what you've gone through.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, so this is Sheriff Wells, Captain Wells. Fluvanna is a rural county law enforcement sheriff's office. We call it one high school county. And he's going to present what happened from their perspective. Of particular interest is the quarantine. Of the various ideas we explored initially, like I said, we said, if it's rabid and you know it, and what we've been explained to us by the vets is you just don't know. However, this went beyond just the dog was acting strangely, and actually there was a legal process that passed, and I think that's going to become the basis of the bill. If you would maybe say what happened.
What's key to remember here is we're talking about rabies, which is an infectious fatal disease. We're not talking about just a simple dog bite. When we get these cases, like in this case, the gentleman called and just said, my dog's acting funny, I'm concerned it might have rabies. Standard protocol is the owner can confine the dog, because the only way to tell if a dog has rabies is, unfortunately, you have to examine its brain tissue post-death. So there's really no way for anybody to know that a live dog has rabies. So we had instructed the gentleman was supposed to quarantine and confine the animal according to code and according to health department regulations on his property. Unfortunately, there was no code that if they failed to do that, we really have no caveat. The only other thing we can do is try to call the health department back and get them to say, no, we have to take the dog, but then we have to euthanize it. And obviously the dog didn't have rabies. We don't want to euthanize someone's pet unnecessarily. So what we're asking for is just a law that would allow us, if they fail to meet the conditions of the confinement and the quarantine, that we have some recourse for them to hopefully give some people some justice and make them take it seriously as well.
Mr. Chair, just to preview, and again, I think it's probably premature to start wordsmithing. Staff had some ideas, we had some ideas, but the basic idea would be it's bad to not quarantine your dog when you're ordered, and it's not a casual thing. I mean, you said someone went out to the house, served them with some paperwork, and then maybe that's level one. If nothing bad happens, level two would be, and maybe some of the language from dangerous or vicious dog, where you're supposed to quarantine, you don't, and then something bad happens. That's a whole other level of obvious concern than just not quarantining the dog. So I think that'll be ready for presentation at a future hearing.
Right.
And if you have any questions for the witnesses while they're here, we'd ask that they.
One thing I failed to mention was, aside from the shots they had, I had 3 of my deputies also had to go through that same series of shots. We had to have a rescue squad person had to get the shots. 2 neighbors had the shots, because we found out after this happened that dog had bit somebody the day before and bit another animal the day before. Luckily that owner did properly quarantine their dogs, so it didn't infect any of their dogs. We actually had to go back to this pet owner's house and seize all the remaining animals. We had to end up euthanizing 2 more dogs and 5 more cats, all because this animal wasn't properly vaccinated and properly quarantined. So, thank you.
What a horrific situation.
It's a small, again, it's not Flavanna, it's not 4,000 people, but how large is your sheriff's office?
We have 34 deputies.
And how many are what I call road deputies?
18.
Yeah, 18 road deputies. This has been a major law enforcement hurdle, a lot of work. So, Mr. Chair, I think that's all we need to do today.
I appreciate that. And
Delegate
Delegate Watts.
Goodbye for the day until.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. Delegate Bell, I'm sure that you've talked with Delegate Auroch. As you perhaps recall, about a decade ago, we went through numerous meetings to define dangerous dogs and pre-bites and all of that to make sure that under the structure that we adopted then, that we can most effectively deal with this irresponsible behavior.
And I should say the issue here was the dog had never been declared dangerous,
but with multiple bites, the
dog we put down no matter what. That doesn't. We're trying to get ahead of this. I mean, this is. I think. I don't want to speak for anybody but myself, but simply saying this dog is now dangerous, we want to put it down. In this instance, where the owner had good notice, didn't take care of it anyway. We want to have some additional suasion, I think, for making sure that it happens. So,
Mr. Chairman, just for clarity, that's exactly what I would hope, that it uses that structure to move it further into this area.
And that's what we were just chatting with before. Right. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Bell. HB 1573 will go by for the day. We have 2 additional patrons who are present right now, and we probably only have time for one, Delegate Rome and Delegate Heretic. Delegate Rome, do you have somebody from out of town who needs to testify?
I do have someone from Prince William County.
Okay.
We can do this super quick, too.
Can we?
Yes.
All right, because we're supposed to get out of here very soon. So, Delegate Rome.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to members of the committee. This is HB 1024 to establish a cold case searchable database. I would note that the chairman is one of the esteemed chief co-patrons of this bill, as is Delegate Glenn Davis, so we've got good bipartisan support already. And the bill will assist state police in solving crimes and bringing violent criminals to justice with a comprehensive database open to the public. It provides more resources for law enforcement officers with only mandates for what the state police told us they need to make the database produce results. Other states already have this. It's been proven effective in states as diverse as Connecticut to Florida to DC. And with that, I will be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Delegate Rome. Just looking this over for a moment. Mr. Mutnick, we define cold case here. It's now become a term of art in the code. I assume it's not defined anywhere else.
It's not defined anywhere else in the code.
Right. And Mr. Chairman, I'll note that in Section A, we do provide that definition.
And 5 years, that's because it takes 5 years to declare somebody legally dead, is that right?
Mr. Chairman, I believe that's 7 years to do that. 5 years, I think, is just a number that was probably chosen by the people putting the bill together.
Would there be any issue with the fact that we are now using different dates for a cold case than we are for whether or not someone is dead?
I don't think so, Mr. Chairman. I think that those things are different enough that they're not going to cause any issues.
Okay. Because I think we have a bill that would lower that as well. Delegate Watts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the definition of cold case, you have 3 different possibilities of triggering the 5 years. Do you not want to have whichever is less?
Mr. Chairman and to members of the committee, to answer Delegate Watts' question, I would just tell the delegate that if it's the will of the body, if she would consider it to be a friendly amendment to do that, I'm certainly amenable to it. I'm much more interested in just making sure that we have a system that's set up, integrated, and so that we don't have 133 different localities not communicating well with each other.
Okay. For a follow-up question before I make a motion. Sure. Is the language before us a compact type of language that other jurisdictions are using, or this is our language?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would tell Delegate Watts that this would be our own language.
Then, Mr. Chairman, I would move that council insert whichever is less, however those words are best inserted.
And that would be on line 18, looks like. So Delegate Watts makes a motion. I'm sure there's a slow second somewhere there.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Delegate Rome, any further questions from the committee? I will just make one comment that in the states that have implemented something like this, as I started to research it, it seems to have a secondary and probably just as good an effect at being able to find missing children and runaway children. So is there anyone here who would like to speak on this bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, my name is Colleen Grantham. I'm a detective with Prince William County, and I currently assist working cold cases. I just wanted to come down and support this bill. The bill on its face doesn't share any more information than we already share on our websites and Facebook pages. And for, like Delegate Rome mentioned, there's 133 jurisdictions in Virginia. It kind of just brings us all together and allows us to share information, and also allows the public to share any information that they might know about cold cases. A lot of times when we're investigating cold cases, we find that people either think that they're already solved or that nobody's looking into them anymore, so they might not share information if they don't know about it. This would help bring information together and also allow law enforcement agencies to share what information they know on the cases, to bring any sort of ties together that they might have with their current cold cases. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Detective. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favor or against this bill? This is okay.
There is Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I would know that there is a budget amendment that goes with it.
So I think if there is a motion, this is going to have to go upstairs no matter what. Delegate Collins.
Hey, just a quick question. And this is probably for Virginia State Police or for the detective. We currently, in the law enforcement agencies, you're currently communicating with other departments, but is there not, what you're saying is there not, for 133 departments, if I am a investigating deputy and I said the suspect was a 5'5", brown hair, white male, and I put that in the system for say a stalking case, is there a way for the system right now, what you have, not the public system, but what you have right now to pop that up to say, oh, we also had a 5'5", brown guy in Prince William County who was stalking? You know what I'm asking?
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, Delegate Collins, we do have a system that's similar to that within different jurisdictions. We also have a federal system that's very similar called VICAP that's also similar to what Delegate Rome is suggesting. But we don't have a statewide database that allows us to access that information now.
And this one would be public.
Yes, it would.
Yeah. Delegate Rome, one last question for you before we might hear a motion. Is this going to include a photo too?
Is this going to include a photo? So I would say that at that point, Mr. Chairman and to members of the committee, the Virginia State Police will be able to basically put up those photos if they so choose in that. But at the same time, I think that we've got enough discretion to the state police for them and the local law enforcement agencies to be able to work on whatever works for them best. So rather than be prescriptive toward them about that, I would much rather leave that to state police for them to figure out what's going to help the public, help them solve crimes and bring people home.
State police, you good?
Mr. Chair? Oh, I'm sorry. No, I've definitely cut you off.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, the state police takes no position on the bill, but I think the information would be sufficient, and it's sufficiently broad to allow for discretion.
And if we give you the money, you can do it.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Delegate Bell.
Okay, I apologize. I'm trying to get up to speed here. So I don't know if this, it sounds like the chairman's concern was this issue, but I'm just reading the words. So there's a lot of stuff in a case file which is important for the ultimate case that for a variety of reasons we would rather not have shared in the public until the case proceeds. And it could even be, I mean, the classic is actually the strange reverse where somebody comes in, confesses to the crime, or partially confesses or something, and they just don't have, there's some things they withhold from the media to make sure they can double check against that you said it was whatever. I mean, that the room was green, and you don't put that out there because when the person says the room was green, in fact it was blue. My concern would be just the language. Any other information that the investigating law enforcement agency determines is relevant. Relevant has a legal meaning which certainly could be read broadly. Can we just say, I don't know, is appropriate or just some other that they choose to put out there? If they say relevant, then the only carve out is though it's necessary.
Delegate Bell, just so we don't go too far down this rabbit hole, I think you and Delegate Watts have been spending a lot of time together because you seem to have both come up to that same idea at the same time.
Oh, okay, wonderful.
Mr. Mutnick, is there a term that could we use necessary, for example?
Necessary is value laden. In other words, I'm actually trying to give discretion. Just find whatever they think is.
We don't want to mandate.
Mr. Chairman, I guess the question is: are we trying to allow law enforcement agencies to withhold information if they choose to?
We are prescribing certain things that must be included. And then allowing them to include additional information if they so wish.
And Mr. Chair?
And the last line of the statute does give the department and the Department of State Police and the local departments the discretion to withhold information they deem necessary for investigative purposes, protection of privacy, or any other lawful reason.
I think what Delegate Bell and Delegate Watts are getting at is not that it's necessary for them to share it, but that relevancy means anything that has a tendency to go to the issue at hand. And so under that theory, everything in the case file could be, if we were to apply the legal definition of relevancy as opposed to the dictionary definition of relevancy.
Mr. Chairman, of the synonyms that I quickly looked at, I think the best one is appropriate.
That's a second person saying appropriate.
Mr. Chair and to members of the committee, I would consider Delegate Watts' suggestion to certainly be a friendly amendment.
Line amendment then.
It's 31.
31 to change the word relevant to appropriate. All those.
Move the amendment.
There you go. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. So at this point, we sort of have the bill before us, and I think
Mr. Chair.
Delegate Bell.
If I'm just trying to that I think eliminates 98% of the worry because.
Right.
But you would still have. I'm just trying to go through the, if you will, the requireds. Name of the victim or missing person unless disclosure is prohibited. I don't know what that code section is. 19.2.11.2. Maybe staff could help.
Mr. Chairman, that's part of the victim rights. The Victim Bill of Rights, that's code section, the victim can request to withhold certain information. it actually doesn't allow the family of the victim to do that, so it really wouldn't apply in this.
Most often when there are child victims.
That it does allow the family to do it when there's a minor involved.
I think we had almost that same.
This came up a couple.
We
years
amended
ago.
that section about 4 years ago.
Came up a couple of years ago.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chair, I guess there's some policy decisions baked in. We're going to put out in public the name of the victim or the missing person. And I can't, again, this is that. Now, if at the very end our cleanup is where we have deemed necessary, but even that, I like the idea. I just want to make sure that we're not. We had a couple cold hits in Charlottesville of some very serious offenses. I think we've cleaned up most of the ways it's going to mess up law enforcement by making appropriate not relevant. But are there other concerns like privacy concerns about so-and-so was raped in the park at 10 o'clock, we never caught the guy? I might not want that information out if I was the person being raped.
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I would just tell Delegate Bell that we actually, in 2018, when I first introduced this bill, we worked out the exact language of the bill with Virginia State Police to basically make sure that this was reasonable, that this was something that they would have enough discretion to do, and that the only mandates that we issue within the bill are stuff that they already basically would want to be pursuing in a missing persons case in the first place. I do think, however, Mr. Chairman, that probably Virginia State Police would be able to better speak to the relevancy, not to use the buzzword, but to basically to the necessity of the part of the bill that's being discussed.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mutnick.
As to the issue with 19.2.11.2, I think that in reviewing the statute again, the first section of that statute says that a crime victim may request that they not be identified, and obviously in the three instances listed in this case, in this database, that's not going to be relevant because it's the victim can't make that request. So really the application is in the second paragraph, which is dealing with the next of kin of a minor, where the minor has been killed, that the minor's name cannot be released except with the consent of the next of kin.
So, Mr. Chairman.
Delegate Rome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So then maybe in line 26, if it would be deemed helpful in this case, if you wanted to just if you want to have an amendment to strike the name of the victim and just have the name, or I would just say of the victim, and then just include the name of the missing person, if that would assuage Delegate Bell's concerns.
These aren't real. Mr. Chair, my concerns aren't fully formed here.
I see where you're going. So my recollection was that 2 years ago, when this first came in, we started to spend some time with it and got down. The original list was much more extensive than what we have come to, and that, if I'm remembering correctly, Delegate Rome, you went back and met with law enforcement and with the state police, and they came back to you with a list.
That's correct.
Okay, so this is the list as approved by the state police.
I can't see anything else on there that would be, I mean, you've got a summary of the crime,
right.
Contact information for the cop, and then crime information, date, time, location. It's only murder and homicide, so that what I guess I end up with the only one that would be something that I think the family may or may not would be the name. And
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
And to members of the committee, maybe I would suggest in this case it's basically that you have the name of the victim in this case is for someone who might have been killed, as opposed to someone who is, say, a sexual assault victim, for example.
Right. And remember, we already changed that 4 years ago. And the delegate from Prince William brought that. So the family already has the discretion in the case of a child to not release that information.
Mr. Chair.
Delegate Bell.
So appreciate that other people have looked at this, including the state police, and are comfortable with it. So I'm going to play out a scenario where the victim is killed in a location where the family is not happy, embarrassed, or to pick a long laundry list of reasons that that's where they were found. We used to use each other's names with film, and now we just use Mr. Smith. So Mr. Smith is in a whatever, something that the family, that they don't want his kids to know that that's where he was when he died.
Dies in a drug house.
Or a place where there's human trafficking, or any number of places. And the rest of the information is, this is a public database, and I don't know, I'm not aware of us making that publicly available automatically, which is what this would be.
So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I would tell Delegate Bell in this case that, especially in my experience as a reporter, having covered crime for 10.5 years, along with a number of other issues, that if you were to say, for example, limit this to what basically goes out in the existing press release in the first place when you're announcing this is the homicide that happened, just the stuff that is already public. If we are just limiting this to information that has already been made public, and we are just simply putting that into a database that's already been put out there, whether it's been
I understand, and I'm running by what Delegate Bell just said, but I mean, this information is already public. It has almost certainly been written about. It's not like someone it goes missing or is murdered without someone commenting on it.
Mr. Chair, I don't. Is that true? I don't know that. If in fact there's some place we can already look this up and it just makes it more easily available. Now, earlier this session we looked at publicly available JNDR records that anybody can go into the court and get, and we decided.
And that was a policy reason.
No, I'm just observing that we've made decisions in the past where we say making it a little harder does, and of course I was on the other side of that, but I'm just saying that there are times we say we don't want to make it
and that
any
was in essence
easier.
what we were saying, right?
Right, and okay. Are the state police available? I mean, maybe this is all out there and I just don't know where to look, and this will make it, because there's a lot of good that would come with this, I presume. I mean, this is how we do crowdsourcing now.
Mr. Chair, Delegate Bell, with regards to the access.
There's a homicide in Fluvanna County, and the gentleman, we don't have one of those, but there's a place where human trafficking goes on, and of minors. I'm trying to think of the worst possible case. And the family says, my God, he's got 3 daughters. We don't want his name with that location, with that date, to be just part of that. Anybody can, who watches too much CSI, can be poking around and see it. If that information is already public, like Delegate Roma said, then, I mean, I guess it's not such a big deal, but I'm not aware of there being a place I can look it up right now until there's a court case. In other words, that sometimes there's press releases, sometimes there's not. Sometimes the press releases are pretty careful about what they put in there. I can't imagine the Fluvanna Review, which is a weekly paper, would put in all those facts. They would just say, Mr. Smith, father of 3 daughters, was found dead. I mean, something like that.
Mr. Chair, Delegate Bell, now I think that it might be a case-by-case situation with regards to whether or not you could access the information. I mean, we certainly live in an age of information, and any particular case that could find its way into this database may very well have some information that's already been put out. But I will point out with regards to the bill that in the last sentence of the proposed language, there is a provision for the protection of privacy as it relates to the discretion for the investigating agency to post certain information to the site. I think that threshold could potentially, given the circumstances, be used in a way to protect the privacy of an individual. But remember that, as far as the cold case, it's only going to be for a homicide, missing person, or unidentified person. So I think that it would be sufficiently narrowed in that context that there could be a circumstance, but I think that discretion is there despite what information may have already been out there to be able to protect the privacy of a victim.
And you all also worked with Delegate Rome on developing this list.
We did. I did not personally, but there was interaction in 2018. Yes.
Thank you. All right. You're making a face here.
No, I think we are being, we have a chance to fix this, and we're going to count on people to get it right after we send it out. And Delegate Rome, what is the benefit of the name?
Sure. So, Mr. Chairman, to members of the committee, I would just say that the benefit of the name is that if you have a missing persons case, I would submit that that's probably most obvious. And if you have a homicide case, then you're basically saying that you're looking for a suspect in the murder of this person, right? And so, for example, in Manassas...
I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but I think Mr. Mutnick has just given us a solution that will make you happy and
We love
will
solutions.
Make Delegate Bell happy. Mr. Mutnick.
Mr. Chairman, I think if we include in the last sentence that starts on line 31, which is the exceptions basically, upon the request of the next of kin of the victim or missing person. Next of kin is a term from the code that we use in the Victim Rights Act.
Delegate Bell is smiling almost.
It wouldn't be, I'm sorry, and where would that go? What are you thinking?
It would read something like this: the
931.
Department of State Police and submitting law enforcement agents shall have the discretion to withhold such information in whole or in part from the database upon the request. I mean, if you want to give them the ability to basically.
What it sounds like.
I understand. I think the concept is there.
Yeah,
the issue would be that I think
Yeah.
the police need to have their own reasons for investigative
Yeah.
purposes, and then
right.
maybe
we can add it to the end and just say another. Get rid of the or and say or upon request of the.
I think
All
that's
right.
workable. We can.
It sounds like we have
Amendment
a
and concept.
motion. Is there a second for that line amendment as read by Mr. Mutnick? Motion a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. It sounds like we have a line amendment now alleviating. There you go.
Report
One
refer.
and.
Second.
Motion a second. All those in favor, please
It's a neat idea.
vote on the electronic voting
Did we
board.
adopt the amendment?
Oh, did we adopt the amendment?
Yeah, I thought you did. I thought you said all those in favor.
Okay. fine.
Okay. All right. All right. Congratulations, Delegate Rome. You do not need to be here for full committee.
Thank you very kindly, Mr. Chair.
Oh, and that is a report and refer. I apologize. That is going upstairs. Right. Okay.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman, to the members committee, and also to Mr. Munich, and as well as to our amazing people over at DLS, and even to our clerks. I just want to say thank you for all the hard work that you all do as well. Thank you.
I second that. Now, unfortunately, we have a hard out in 6 minutes, and at this point, I think we're going to have to carry over until Monday. Delegate Heretic, I am sorry.
Can I get it in 6 minutes? You think I can?
He's just got the one bill.
Oh, yes, you only have the one, because we're not, the other one we're only. All right, well then, you only have 1213?
Yeah.
All right, you swear 6 minutes.
I swear to God.
Well, all right, I'm going to make you, it's not everybody here, too. There are like 3 people on the committee who could be, all right, go.
There's an amendment. Just help me here. There's an amendment.
There's an amendment that says repeal.
Yeah. Let me just tell you the problem. Let me tell you what we're doing. This comes at the request of the City of Norfolk, who would like to use their municipal employees to serve summonses to enforce local codes problems. In other words, heretic, you haven't cut your grass, here's a summons, come to court. Currently, to do that, they have to have DCJS certification, which means they have to spend a couple of weeks becoming SCOP certified. They don't want to have to go through all that because, after all they're doing is typically serving code summonses. It's like, here, come to court. There's no arrest, there's no handcuffing, there's no Fourth Amendment, nothing. Basically, the City of Norfolk is asking, and with the amendment, let me just read you the provision, as amended, this is what it would say. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, a locality may appoint and train local government employees to enforce local ordinances by issuing summonses for misdemeanor violations of ordinances that are within the purview of the employee's employment. Such employees shall not have the power and authority of constables at law. Their power shall be limited to issuing such summonses in their locality. Period. The end.
Thank you, Delegate Heretic.
I told you 6 minutes or less.
All right, so Delegate Heretic is asking that we adopt his line amendments. Motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those against say nay. Is there anyone here, while we are reading this over, who would like to speak?
We have the Honorable Thelma Drake, former member of the House of Delegates, former member of Congress, and generally goddess.
Thank you, Mr.
Congresswoman.
Chairman, members of your committee. I just wanted to point out to you that we did have this authority to deliver these summonses, but in 2014, there were some changes made to this section of the code, and I believe inadvertently they were deleted. So we're just trying to go back and do what we've always done. I did speak with Delegate Lingenfelter, who was the patron of that bill at the time, and he had no idea that this had happened. So there is no law enforcement ability with these. So I hope it'll be your pleasure to report the bill and let us do what they.
I'm glad that you consulted with the colonel.
Well, I wanted to know what happened.
Just so I'm placated. This doesn't make anybody an S-cop, right?
Never.
Thank you.
That's why we took that section of the
That
code
is
out.
why I am much happier.
We love to make you happy, Mr. Chairman.
God, if only other people said that.
They don't have an escargot.
Oh, all right. It's a groaner. We got 3 minutes. Anybody want to speak against this bill?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Maybe for staff. This feels weird, but the former delegate colleague and congresswoman has said it isn't, and it used to be there. Is that your understanding too? Because I don't.
Mr. Chairman, what I think
just little C conservatives. I'm not big C, but just I've never heard of this. If it's always been there and it worked out fine, then it's not. I don't care so much. But
what I think is that they added a number of standards to the code for people who would be able to issue summonses, which then it probably inadvertently accepted county code enforcement. And so I don't think there was ever explicit power in the code for county code enforcement to do that. I may be wrong. It's before my time.
That's the Senate version of this bill. They added the original language back into the bill, but by authority of our charter and special police appointed and overseen by our police chief, they had that authority, but it was removed in that 2014. I was hoping Delegate Watts and maybe Delegate Bell were involved in that discussion, but it happened truly, I think, inadvertently. It was about training private sector law enforcement.
So, Congresswoman, what you're trying to tell us here is that this is all the Senate's fault?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you. You know what? You just gained.
Elections have consequences. This is why you took the House back, and that issue we messed up.
And if you vote in the next 30 seconds, we can be
okay.
Mr. Chair, is the language of I've never heard authority of constables? Is that just means they can't arrest? They can only issue summonses. That's the term of art.
Only issue a summons, and we don't do that, and never did in Norfolk. We would use a police officer if there was an issue.
Feel strongly.
All right.
I was going to give a little bit.
8 seconds.
I was going to a little bit more history on this because we delved in this a few years ago when we took powers away, gave more authority to. We have also in city, counties, and towns have limited the number of things that we can put into the code that we can make misdemeanors for summonses. So.
Actually, Delegate Carol Foy used the box, and then Delegate Adams.
So this is, Mr. Chairman, this is very rare, but I think I share some of the sentiment that Delegate Bell may be sharing. Also, just something doesn't necessarily feel right about having lay people issuing legal processes, something like a summons. A summons in nature means basically notice to appear. You can't be arrested on a summons unless one of the exceptions apply, such as the person who's giving the summons believe that you will not come to court. Right? Then you can actually be arrested on a summons. So there's 3 instances where a person can be arrested on a summons, and I just have an issue with the.
But remember, if I can, Delegate, Mr. Chairman, the added language that's now substituted specifically says their power shall be limited to issuing such summonses in their locality. Period.
And Delegate Carol Foy, you are getting very good at reading my mind. And when Delegate Heretic first brought me this bill, I raised the same concern. And so, hence the line amendment. If we need to belt and suspenders it, we always can. But
if somebody needs to be arrested, the police show up.
And say that, I'm sorry, one more time.
So if somebody needs to be arrested or taken into custody, then Norfolk police show up.
Then they show up. Okay. And so just quick follow-up, Mr. Chairman. So with the issuing such summonses in their locality, period, it's the assumption of everyone that those exceptions to where a person can be arrested on a summons won't apply. Is that correct?
No, those exceptions could apply but can't be effectuated by this person. So, it still could apply, but they couldn't do anything about it.
They couldn't do it. Okay.
They couldn't do it.
Then that would be fine.
Law enforcement officer would have to.
No worries. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Okay. Delegate Adams.
All right, and so my question was going to be along the line of what the commenter mentioned in terms of a Senate version where it restored previous language, you said. I mean, and if the chairman's open to this, since he's eager to end up for the day, I mean, is there a reason why we can't try to use previous language that may have inadvertently been removed instead of a whole new code section, and could we pass by and just have that drafted?
So, Delegate Heretic, it sounds like there's, I wouldn't say a fever, but things are warming up on this side. I know that you worked very hard with me to be able to placate my concerns, but I am just one of the people who are sitting up here. Perhaps we could take this by until Monday, and you might be able to work with Mr. Mutnick and some others on here.
Frank, go ahead.
I think there are a lot of people that did not want that approach, because we've worked on this since November with Police Chief Association, through the sheriffs, Virginia Municipal League. That's why in the amendment it even takes out any references to 19.2, because they don't want any confusion that these municipal employees are going out because I've had a wetlands violation. And in Norfolk, we don't want the police delivering that summons. I think it's much more friendly if the person you've worked with all along is the one who brings you the paper.
Delegate Watts.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, if you're going to work on this, I have never seen on line 18 within the purview of the employee's employment. Is that standard language in the code? And if it isn't standard, perhaps there is a term of art that would be better than purview of the employee's employment.
This was so confusing that we asked Legislative Services to take our work, because there were so many comments trying to get the language to where it was really limited. It was Legislative Services language.
All right, thank you.
So, I see a lot of faces up here. We can do a couple of things, and this is where I'm just going to sort of informally take a temperature. Are we comfortable with this as the language exists, or are people wanting to offer line amendments, or are people feeling like we need to take this by for the day, work with it? I don't think anybody wants to make the lives of municipal enforcement agencies harder. I mean, it seems like this was an authority at one point just 5 or 6 years ago. So I guess taking a temperature here.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I don't speak for anybody but me. We often don't do our best work under the gun.
That's why.
This doesn't seem like a big deal, and it seems fixable. But it sounds like everybody wants to get out, and that's okay. But I just maybe.
Delegate, I would like you to be able to pass this bill.
Or the front of the docket,
we can just put it at the top on Monday. Is that all right?
Sure. The problem is I just don't understand what the concern is, what we have to fix.
Well, I think that Delegate Watts and Delegate Bell can chat with you a little bit as soon as we gavel out and express some concerns. Maybe they're different from my old ones.
See you on Monday.
Thank you, Delegate Heretic. And with that, the remaining bills, HB 225, my own HB 660, and HB 1522, and HB 1592, all of those will go by until Monday. And with that, this committee is adjourned.